Chapter 465. The man in the room asked, but I didn't answer. I just raised my hand and knocked on the door one more time. Who is it? The man's voice became more cautious. Before I could answer, I felt a cold aura shoot toward me from the other side of the door. This aura wasn't strong. With my current cultivation base, I could deal with it easily. I stood still, and a witchcraft energy barrier automatically appeared in front of my chest. After this barrier was formed, an ear-piercing and short sound abruptly sounded out. Subsequently, an extremely tiny black shadow drilled a small hole through the solid wooden door and pierced straight through it. It pierced straight into the shaman energy barrier, and only then did it stop moving and was enveloped in midair. I focused and saw that the small shadow was a black steel needle. The tip of the needle was sharp, just like an ordinary steel needle. The thick part at the back was carved with all kinds of hollow inscriptions. A thick wisp of energy twirled around it. It didn't look ordinary at all. When it came to controlling a magic tool, the smaller it was, the harder it was to control it. From this steel needle, I could tell that the man in the room had an extraordinary cultivation base. However, I sensed that the energy on the steel needle was at the middle stage of the glorious era. It wasn't a threat to me. I retrieved the witchcraft energy barrier and let the steel needle fall to the ground. Then I reached my hand out and touched the door in front of me. The high-quality wooden door turned into powder in just a blink of an eye. The other party had proactively attacked me, so it was useless to hide my aura. I directly walked into the room. After entering the room, I glanced around and saw a middle-aged man in his 40s standing by the table in front of me. He had a long, thin face and triangular eyes. He had a dark aura around him. He looked at me cautiously, his eyes solemn. "Who are you? Why did you trespass my house?" The man spoke fluent Cantonese and asked me in a gloomy voice. Cantonese was quite different from Mandarin, but after all, I had stayed in Shenzhen for a period of time. Under the influence of what I saw and heard, I could still understand this sentence. Of course, I wouldn't answer his boring question. I waved my hand, and my Tao energy covered the entire room. After confirming that the man couldn't use Tao techniques to communicate with the outside world, I asked him faintly, "Are you the one who sold the ghost to Wudunka?" "Wudunka?" The man was startled. He immediately switched to Mandarin with a thick accent and answered, "That's right, Wudunka did hire one from my place. I can see that your cultivation is not bad, so you must be someone from the mainland's metaphysics world. I'm not sure about the situation in your mainland, but in Hong Kong, hiring and selling ghosts is a business transaction. There's no reason to pick a fight after the fact. What do you want to know? I'll tell you everything I know." I couldn't help but laugh. This person was smart enough to change his facial expression easily. Of course, I didn't care about his character. I just asked, "Tell me your identity. Also, why did you sell the ghost to Wudunka?" Yes. The man nodded and continued, "I'm Wen Shiliang, an elder of the ghost-raising sect. I'm friends with Wudunka. A few days ago, he came to me with money and asked me to set up a trap to stop the construction of the building. I was blinded by greed. Hearing this, I sneered. This man had Shi Yao cultivation base. In the secular world, he could be considered a master. Moreover, he held a high position in the ghost-raising sect. He definitely didn't lack money. Moreover, Wudunka was just a small leader of the Wang group in Hong Kong. How much money could he have that elder one would want? I interrupted him and shook my head. I advise you to tell me the truth. Okay, I'll tell you the truth. Hearing my words, Wen Shiliang's face turned frightened. He nodded repeatedly. It seemed my Taoist technique had given him a big shock. He was silent for a while, as if organizing his words. Then, like pouring beans out of a bamboo tube, he continued that Wudinka has a 7 baneful fate. The little ghost refined from the soul of this kind of person will be very powerful. It was because of his 7 baneful fate that I decided to help him. I gave him the expelling talisman with the ghost life talisman's incantation. As long as he uses the ghost life talisman, he will die. This kind of 7 fiend's soul with the incantation isn't weak. The ghost refined from it will be a ghost king. With more training, it can even become an Een spirit. That's why I thought about it. I was blinded by greed and broke the rules of the feng shui circle. However, I still told Wudinka about this. He was willing to kill me. You can't blame me for this. Senior, please be merciful and let me go. No matter what conditions you have, I will agree to them all. If not, I don't want this 7 fiend's soul anymore. Senior, please take it. When Shiliang flattered me and looked at me with a hopeful face, I couldn't help but laugh. This 7 fiend's soul sounded incredible, but it was just a ghost at the Ghost King level. In the future, it would only have a chance to become an Een spirit. It wasn't anything special, let alone Tong Tong. Even the well ghost I had encountered was much stronger than this 7 fiend's soul. When Shiliang thought that I wanted to steal the 7 fiend's soul, it was ridiculous. I didn't mind him and just sighed. As things had come to this, the whole thing was in order. It was a pity that Wudinka had helped Elder when Shiliang of the ghost-raising faction before his death. Thinking to this point, I sighed. Wudinka had used all kinds of schemes. To vent his anger, he didn't care about anything else. In the end, not only did he fail to vent his anger, but his soul also ended up like this after his death. He had brought this upon himself. As the old saying went, one shouldn't have the intention to harm others. From the moment Wudinka decided to harm others, his fate was already set. Senior, I've told you everything I know. Please let me go. I will change my evil ways. I won't break the rules again. I won't harm people again. When Shiliang became even more terrified when he saw that I didn't speak for a long time, he continued to beg, please let me go this time. I smiled non-committally and ignored his pleading. There's one more thing. Your ghost-raising sect's Grand Supreme Elder, Jiang Tianxin, is an old friend of mine. Do you know where he is? Grand Supreme Elder? When Shiliang's expression turned solemn when I mentioned Jiang Tianxin, he paused for a moment before continuing, the Grand Supreme Elder comes and goes like a ghost. Apart from a few close friends, I'm afraid no one knows where he is hiding. However, since Senior is an old friend of the Grand Supreme Elder, why don't you come to our sect's main altar and leave your name? Someone will naturally inform the Grand Supreme Elder. I shook my head. An old friend is an old friend. However, I'm looking for him to settle an old score. When Shiliang's pupils shrank, he couldn't speak for a long time. When I was dealing with him earlier, I had actually used my Heavenly Master technique. However, he might not have been able to see through it with his cultivation. At this moment, my words had clearly told him that I had a Heavenly Master cultivation base. It was normal for Wen Shiliang to be frightened after knowing that he had offended a Heavenly Master. I didn't have time to think about his thoughts and continued to ask, you really don't know his whereabouts? I really don't know, but Wen Shiliang was as quiet as a cicada in winter. Then he seemed to recall something. But what? A few days ago, I heard from another elder in the sect that a rich businessman from the New Territories is going to hold a banquet in a few days and invited the Grand Supreme Elder to attend the banquet. That rich businessman is a person on the list of billionaires and has some connections in the feng shui circle of Hong Kong. It is very likely that the Grand Supreme Elder will attend the banquet, Wen Shiliang answered respectfully. Then, he didn't wait for me to ask and directly told me the story. According to him, there was a rich merchant in the new territories of Hong Kong. He was a wealthy man who often appeared in the newspapers. He had a strange dream a few days ago. He dreamt that his father was being bullied by evil spirits in the underworld. The rich merchant asked someone to check and said that the feng shui of his ancestors' grave wasn't good. It had been eroded by yin energy. That was why his business was affected. The rich merchant also knew something about feng shui. Soon, he decided to move the grave. However, this merchant wasn't an ordinary person. His family had been rich for many years. His ancestor's grave was a famous place with good feng shui in Hong Kong. Of course, he couldn't choose a random place to move the grave. At the very least, the feng shui of his ancestor's grave couldn't be worse. He couldn't make up his mind at the moment. However, this merchant was rich and didn't lack money. That was why he decided to hold a banquet in the new territories a few days later. He invited some big shots of Hong Kong's feng shui circle. He hoped that they could work together to move the grave. That merchant has a lot of money, and he attached great importance to moving the grave. He promised a lot of money. Of course, the Grand Supreme Elder doesn't like those common things. However, I heard that the merchant has collected many rare treasures in the feng shui circle. Even the Heavenly Master is interested in them. That's why the Grand Supreme Elder will go to the banquet, said Wen Shiliang. Rare treasures that even the Heavenly Master is interested in. I thought for a while and didn't really care. The glory of Knowledge Realm and the Heavenly Master Realm were only one step apart, but in fact, they were very far apart. Below the Heavenly Master, everyone was an ordinary person. They were born in the mortal world and blended with the mortal world. They weren't much different from each other. However, the Heavenly Master was beyond the mortal world. They were no different from immortals. Ordinary people could understand the power of the Earth Master, but they couldn't understand the power of the Heavenly Master. Although Hong Kong had a strong feng shui circle, I didn't think that ordinary people would have treasures that even the Heavenly Master would envy. However, if Liang Tianxin was likely to go there, I would have to go there when the time came. After asking for the merchant's name and the location of the banquet, I rubbed my chin and thought about how to deal with Wen Shiliang. This kind of person had been dealing with sorcery all year round. He didn't have a good heart. Moreover, he had an extraordinary cultivation base. If I let him live, he would be a disaster. Moreover, someone had to take responsibility for the souls that had died in the Wong Group's construction site. However, it wasn't fair to put all the blame on this person. After all, Wu Dunka was the one who had caused the Wong Group's destruction. Wen Shiliang had just given Wu Dunka a butcher's knife. What should I do with him? Wen Shiliang looked at my expression and seemed to understand what I was thinking. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed as if he was pounding garlic. He cried, "Senior, I have told you everything I know. Please spare my life. I will definitely turn over a new leaf in the future." After listening to him, I waved my hand. When Shiliang slumped to the ground, the yin energy in his body moved like gray snakes. Chapter 466. That afternoon, after eating lunch with Dai Nanzhou, I took a taxi to the famous Skyline Marriott Hotel in New Territories. The Skyline Marriott Hotel was located at the southern end of Hong Kong, on the shore of the South Sea. The scenery was beautiful, and because it was located by the sea, it created a feeling of being far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It was very famous in Hong Kong, and was one of the famous five-star hotels in Asia. According to Wen Shiliang, the rich man's banquet was arranged in the banquet hall on the second floor of this hotel. I got out of the car at the entrance of the hotel. Soon, a waiter came to greet me warmly. He didn't neglect me because I took a taxi. After asking for my destination, he led me to the banquet hall. At this time, there were many people coming and going at the entrance of the banquet hall. Among them, there were young people in suits and leather shoes, and there were also some old people in Chinese tunic suits. These people walked to the door and handed over their invitations. Immediately, there were waiters in suits who smiled and led them in. Looking at the door that opened from time to time, there were dozens of people inside. All of them had Dao Qi on them. They should be the feng shui masters that the rich man had invited. Of course, I didn't have an invitation, but it wasn't a problem for me. When I walked to the door, I silently activated the Dao Qi in my body and wrapped myself up. Then, I pushed open the door and swaggered into the banquet hall. Dao Qi had many uses. Hiding one's aura was one of them. Not only did I hide my aura, but I also hid my body. When I walked past the door, the people around me couldn't see me at all. Of course, this was only effective against people with lower cultivation than me. If their cultivation was higher than mine, they would be able to see through me. After entering, I looked around. The banquet hall was very big. At the end of the hall was an antique wall. There was a banner with 3 big words on it, Dragon-Seeking Banquet. Before I came, I learned that this dragon-seeking banquet was a custom of Hong Kong. Hong Kong had always been a place of metaphysics. No matter if it was a small family or a rich merchant, they would invite a feng shui master to come and check on the situation. After inviting someone to do something, there would always be a meal to thank them. This meal was called the Dragon-Seeking Banquet. At that moment, it seemed that the rich merchant hadn't arrived yet. Most of the feng shui masters in the banquet hall were chatting in 2s and 3s. I looked around. Most of the people present were at the glorious memory realm. Only a few of the young people's cultivation wasn't enough, and were still at the pressure point realm. I couldn't help but sigh. This was indeed Hong Kong, a place where metaphysics flourished. He continued, "Recently, I've been dreaming about my father being bullied by evil spirits in the underworld. I've also made a lot of mistakes in my business. It's okay when it comes to business, but my father has worked hard for me his whole life. As his son, how could I bear to see him suffer in the underworld? Today, I've invited you here because of this. All of you here are experts in feng shui, and your cultivation base isn't ordinary. I sincerely ask you to help me solve the problem in front of me. I want to let my father's soul rest in peace in the underworld. Then, I will have fulfilled my duty as a son." Mi Ding City bowed to the crowd again. His words and actions were full of sincerity. The crowd quickly stood up. A dark, skinny old man in the front row said to me, "Ding City, Mr. Mi, you're too kind. Everyone in Hong Kong knows that Mr. Mi is the leader of Hong Kong's business world. You've given us face by inviting us here today. As long as we can do something, no one would dare to hide it. You don't need to be so polite. Mr. Mi." The feng shui masters all chimed in, showing their respect for Mi Ding City. "Mr. Ma Junquan, you're a senior in the feng shui sect. Your words put me at ease." The feng shui master who spoke just now seemed to be familiar with Mi Ding City. Mi Ding City stroked his beard and responded with a smile. "Ha ha, Elder Mi is a man of virtue and prestige. Since there's a need for us geomancers today, we're all willing to climb mountains of blades and swim through seas of fire for it. Elder Mi, please tell us what's going on." Mi Ding City stroked his beard. "There's no hurry. Everyone here is one of the top masters in Hong Kong, and you all have deep attainments in feng shui. Now that I've taken up so much of your time, I already feel bad about it. How can I let you all starve and listen to this old man's story? Come, let's eat first. I'll tell you in detail after dinner." Mi Ding City clapped his hands. and the waiter began to serve the dishes. The food was sumptuous, but the people here were all big shots. Their minds weren't on the food. Most of them picked a few mouthfuls and finished the meal hastily. Seeing that everyone was almost done, the waiter brought some refreshments and tea. Me Ding City said, "Since I've invited you here today, I won't let you come for nothing. All the gentlemen present today will receive a reward of $500,000 each. In addition, I'll also reward you handsomely for helping my family out of this disaster. I'm sure you'll be satisfied." All the feng shui masters cheered when they heard me Ding City's words. Those who were qualified to attend the meeting were all influential people. 500,000 might not be a big deal, but me Ding City was a wealthy businessman and had a high status in Hong Kong. It was an honor to be paid by me Ding City, only I didn't feel anything. I wasn't from Hong Kong. Although I'd heard of me Ding City's fame, I didn't feel proud. Moreover, I was here to find Liang Tianxin. I was getting impatient since he hadn't shown up yet. However, me Ding City began to tell me the story of his family. Since I had nothing to do, I calmed down and listened. Although I have some property now, I was born poor when I was young. My father ran a small grocery business to support his family. Later on, he met a beggar who had fled from the mainland. Me Ding City's voice was sad as he told the story of the Me family. Back then, Me Ding City's father ran a small grocery store. At that time, Hong Kong's economy was poor, and people didn't have much money. Their purchasing power was limited, and they had a lot of children. However, Me Ding City's father was a kind man. When he met the old beggar outside his grocery store, he saw that the beggar was sick and had no one to rely on. He didn't have the heart to drive the beggar away. After thinking for a while, he gritted his teeth and took the beggar into his store. He took good care of the beggar for many days and saved his life. From then on, the old beggar stayed with the Me family. Me Ding City's father took good care of him. Once, the family bought a carp. Before his wife and children could eat it, Me Ding City's father brought a bowl of fish soup to the beggar. He said that the soup was good for the body and that the beggar needed it more. "Dad, we have nothing to do with this old beggar. We've been taking care of him for so long, but he hasn't gotten any better. Do you still want to take care of him until he dies? Life at home has always been tight, not to mention the fact that we can't feed so many mouths. It's not easy for us to see meat and fish, but you've given it all to him." Hearing the children cry like that, as a mother, I feel terrible. His wife complained about Me Ding City's father more than once. However, Me Ding City's father couldn't kick the old beggar out no matter what. He still took care of the poor man like he did his own father. Unfortunately, the old beggar didn't make it through the winter of that year. That winter was unusually cold in Hong Kong. The old beggar's body was weak. He lay on the bed, wrapped in several layers of blankets, but there wasn't a trace of warmth. He didn't last long before he died. The day before he died, he struggled to call Me Ding City's father to his bedside. It was the first time he spoke to Me Ding City's father in days. "You're a good person. I've been eating and living with you for so long, but I can't repay you. I can only give you a piece of good fortune to thank you for taking care of me these days." The old beggar spoke in a serious tone, but Me Ding City's father thought it was absurd. He thought to himself, "You're just a penniless old beggar. How can you give me a piece of good fortune when you're about to die?" Although the old beggar was down and out, he was also weather-beaten. He knew what Me Ding City's father was thinking at a glance. He said with difficulty, "Don't look down on this old beggar's good fortune. Fate is determined by heaven, but feng shui is determined by man. As long as you listen to me, I can guarantee that your family's wealth will continue." Me Ding City's father listened to the old beggar's words and became serious. He asked the old man for guidance. The old beggar was about to die. He talked for a while, rested for a while, and gestured with his hands. After a long time, he told me Ding City's father 5 locations. He said that they were the 5 graves he had chosen. After making sure that Mi Ding City's father remembered the locations, the old beggar grabbed Mi Ding City's father's hand and said solemnly, "These 5 graves, 1 ominous and 4 auspicious. After I die, you don't need a coffin. Just wrap me in a straw mat and bury me in that ominous cave. Remember, and your me family's grave will be moved to." Unfortunately, the old beggar breathed his last at this moment. Mi Ding City's father was confused at first, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt that the old beggar wouldn't say anything wrong before he died. Therefore, he followed the old beggar's instructions and buried him in that ominous cave. Then, based on his shallow knowledge of feng shui, he moved his family's grave to a place that he thought had good feng shui. The second year after he moved his family's grave, Mi Ding City's father hit the jackpot and quickly became rich. Since then, the Mi family's children were filial, and the family business grew bigger and bigger. In recent years, the Mi family had become the biggest family in Hong Kong. Outsiders didn't know, but Mi Ding City knew very well that the Mi family's prosperity was all because of the old beggar's protection. Mi Ding City's tears flowed down his face. "I sent people to investigate. That old beggar was a feng shui master from the mainland. He was persecuted and fled to Hong Kong. After I found out his name, I set up a memorial tablet for him at home. I thought that with his guidance, the Mi family would be prosperous for generations to come. I didn't expect that so many things would happen. I couldn't figure out the reason at first, but when I recalled what my father had told me, I thought that perhaps the old man had already predicted that our Mi family would end up like this. So he pointed out the 4 auspicious acupoints. So, after much consideration, I decided to move my family's grave." Chapter 467. After Mi Ding Chung finished his story, he used his sleeve to wipe away the tears at the corner of his eyes. Then, he sat down on a chair and looked at the crowd with an inquiring gaze. Feng shui has the theory of luck, but evil feng shui can also bury people and even attract dragon energy to protect the later generations. However, this method of seeking survival in the midst of danger is not something that can be easily done by those with great cultivation. From this, we can see that the old man is indeed an expert in feng shui. If the evil feng shui is like this, then there is no need to talk about the auspicious feng shui. Old Mi's family's decades of wealth is indeed related to this senior's words. The dark-skinned old man who spoke first, Ma Junkuan, was the first to agree. Mi Ding Chung nodded. "Mr. Ma is right. When I went to the mainland to do business, a feng shui master from Beijing's Gong Gu Alley said the same thing. However, it doesn't seem appropriate to say it this way. At this moment, an old man with white hair and a youthful complexion seemed to be puzzled. "Oh, what is Mr. Lu's opinion?" Mi Ding Chung asked. The old man named Lu used the flipping trigram palm and lowered his head to calculate for a while before continuing. "Feng shui does have the theory of luck, but evil feng shui requires an auspicious feng shui. The so-called auspicious feng shui refers to the value of one's fate. Only when one's bone weighs 7 taels can it be considered precious. This kind of fate not only gives one a lifetime of glory, but also benefits one's descendants after death. Even if one's descendants have a miserable life, they can still be set right by their elders. This is good luck. However, the senior old me spoke of was persecuted and died in a foreign land. His fortune cannot be said to be great, so how could he have good luck? It seemed that this old man was an expert in bone weighing and fortune-telling. His analysis of fate feng shui made sense. Although the path of weighing bones is exquisite and concise, it has its own limitations. The theory of weighing bones generally only has 51 kinds of fates. How can you be sure that the old senior and the ancestor of the Mi family are among these 51 kinds of people? Before Mi Ding-chung could speak, a hot-blooded young man spoke first. I listened attentively and found it interesting as well. In fact, this young man was right. Bone weighing and fortune-telling has its limitations, but feng shui needs to be considered from all sides. Oh, so it's the boy from the Huang family of the 9 dragons. It's fine if your cultivation is low and your knowledge is shallow, but do you know that there's a hierarchy in understanding the Tao? Don't you have the slightest bit of manners when talking to your seniors? Your Huang clan's upbringing is quite interesting. The geomancer surnamed Lu seemed to have a grudge against the Huang clan, so his words were quite sharp. The young feng shui master Huang's previous words were indeed a little impolite. At this time, his face turned red. Since he was in the wrong, he didn't dare to argue anymore. He just replied politely in a low voice, "Everyone's horoscope is different. Martial Uncle Lu hasn't come to the scene to investigate, nor has he asked for the old beggar and the Mi family's ancestor's birth date. It's a little arbitrary to make such a conclusion." Humph! The white-haired old man flicked his sleeves and snorted coldly. He didn't say anything else, as if he disdained to pay any attention to him. What the two of you have said is correct. Elder Lu's words were words of experience, and Brother Huang's words were also words of wisdom. You and I haven't been to the scene yet, so it's inconvenient for us to make a conclusion. As for the actual map, we'll naturally come to a conclusion after we do a field investigation. Seeing that the two were arguing fiercely, a fat feng shui master walked out to smooth things over. However, his words seemed to be biased towards the young man surnamed Huang. With someone smoothing things over, the old man surnamed Lu and the young man surnamed Huang both took a step back and didn't argue anymore. Ma Zhongkuan, who was sitting to the side, stroked his goatee and smiled at everyone. What the several Taoists said is reasonable. In the path of feng shui, it's a good thing that everyone can argue about it. Now that we've discussed it, why don't we let Mr. Mi take us to the scene to investigate? Hearing this, Mi Ding-chung smiled. This is my fault. I haven't taken everyone to the scene yet, and I'm begging everyone to make a decision. Haha, it's my fault. If everyone is ready, I'll take everyone to the tombs. As he said so, everyone stood up and excitedly prepared to set off with Mi Ding's city. I sat in the corner, my eyebrows slightly furrowed. Mi Ding-cheng's story was quite interesting, and I was quite interested in the old beggar's tombs. However, my purpose in coming here is Liang Tianxin. The banquet is about to end. Could it be that Jiang Tianxin won't come? Just as I was getting impatient and was about to think of another method, Mi Ding-chung gestured for the feng shui masters to calm down. Once everyone quieted down, Mi Ding-chung waved his hand at the person beside him. Someone immediately came over with a wooden tray. The tray was covered with red silk, making it impossible to see what was on it. However, judging from Mi Ding-cheng's solemn expression, it seemed to be something extraordinary. As I said before, everyone who came to the banquet will receive a reward of 500,000. However, I know that everyone here is a senior expert in feng shui and won't care about gold and silver. Therefore, in addition to the reward, if you can choose the best feng shui from the 3 tombs and help me resolve my doubts, I will reward you handsomely. First, Mi Ding-chung took us to the grave cave where the old beggar was buried. After we got out of the car, I lowered my head and looked around. I couldn't help but frown. The other geomancy masters had the same expression as me. More or less, they were all shocked. The lone grave in front of him was located on a flat, open land. It protruded abruptly, its head protruded, and there seemed to be 5 claws at the bottom. After the erosion of wind and rain for a long time, the 5 claws had become particularly sharp. That's the Heavenly Dipper tiger palm. It's extremely ominous. An old man in a Taoist robe grabbed a horsetail whisk and screamed. The old Taoist wasn't lying. According to the Jewel Illumination scripture, the lone grave had a Heavenly Dipper body and a sharp foot. It was called the Heavenly Dipper tiger palm. This star was extremely malicious. Even if you had 5 lucky stars to form an acupoint, you wouldn't be able to use it, especially in a flat area like this. The Heavenly Dipper tiger palm was a disaster. No one could solve it, although the geomancy technique required an evil cave. I was surprised that the old beggar had chosen such a dangerous grave. This cave is too dangerous, let alone nurturing it. It's hard to even enter the cycle of reincarnation, said a middle-aged man with a strange aura. This middle-aged man was around 40 years old. His face was pale, and he had a faint wisp of Yin energy. Apparently, he was someone who practiced evil techniques. I sank into my thoughts and carefully checked the surroundings of the grave. There was no shelter around the grave. From the flow of the water, sand, and stones, I could tell that this was a grave with no descendants. It was a place with the most malicious geomancy. I had no doubt about it. He dared to bury his body in such an evil cave. I closed my eyes and pondered. I was afraid that even with my current cultivation, I wouldn't dare to do that. The old beggar's attainment in geomancy wasn't bad. Since we had reached a consensus on the geomancy of this grave, Mi Dingcheng didn't say anything. He took us to another graveyard. This graveyard was the ancestral grave of the Mi family. It was where Mi Dingcheng's father had buried his ancestor. People could see through the Heavenly Dipper tiger palm at first glance, but the geomancy of the Mi family's ancestral grave in front of us wasn't. I had to check for a long time to see through it. The Mi family's ancestral grave was located in a hilly area. The stars were upright, and there were many small veins on the left and right. The curve in the front was long and sharp, while the small vein in the center was connected to a semicircular mound. Moreover, this place used sand to seal the acupoints. It seemed to be based on the direction, which was quite rare. Everyone frowned and pondered. After a long time, an old geomancy master said hesitantly, "Could this be the Xianga Linjeng Long? This is the acupoint of Greedy Wolf Fu Bai, and there is no Lianzhen as the ancestor. It's easy to get an official title, but not the 3 dukes." The old man who spoke was about 70 years old. He had a goatee, and his qi of Tao was very weak. I'm afraid he was only at the acupoint sealing realm. However, his attainment in geomancy was not bad. Besides me, he was the first one to see through the geomancy. After being reminded by him, the other geomancy masters all slapped their heads. Wasn't this the Xianga Linjeng Long? According to the shocking dragon scripture, this kind of geomancy hid a calamity in a blessing. The descendants were smart and knowledgeable, and most of them could become officials in one go. However, because it was the acupoint of Greedy Wolf Fu Bai, they needed the protection of Mount Shao. Otherwise, they wouldn't be the 3 dukes, and wealth wouldn't be passed down for 3 generations. In layman's terms, this acupoint was a little strange. It was considered an auspicious acupoint, but it hid a calamity. It depended on whether the life palace of the buried person was strong enough to withstand the calamity. If it couldn't, the auspicious acupoint would only last for 3 generations. After that, it would bring calamity to the descendants, and they wouldn't be able to protect them for eternity. Although this kind of geomancy was rare, it coincided with the heavens. It was like the Han people used to give their children despicable names like Stone and Tile. It was said that when it came to reincarnation, such despicable names couldn't enter the reincarnation cycle of humans or animals. Since they couldn't easily fall into the reincarnation cycle, they could naturally live to 100 years old. Therefore, despicable names contained the humblest expectations of their fathers. Of course, after the despicable nicknames, they would often come up with a great name. For example, the name of the founder of the current dynasty was meant to nourish the East. However, people were born with a great life, and it was enough to support this great name. It was the same for choosing ancestral graves. Some had excellent geomancy, and their ancestors' bones were buried there, and their descendants would have a long life of good fortune. Of course, this was the best place to fix the acupoint. However, there were also some geomancy that could also bring good fortune to the descendants. However, it was similar to the old beggar's luck-changing technique. The auspicious acupoint also needed to be supported by a noble fate, the family's fate, and the ancestors' fate. Otherwise, it would be like a child carrying a stone that weighed several hundred pounds. If he couldn't support it, he would be crushed. The string song facing the political dragon in front of us was like this. The geomancy of this place was excellent, but it wasn't something an ordinary person could control. Chapter 468. The past couldn't be investigated. Dozens of years had passed, and we couldn't figure out why the old man chose this grave for the Me family. We couldn't figure it out just by looking at the tomb's geomancy. Thus, we didn't linger on this issue. After a short discussion, we followed Mi Ding Chung to the third tomb. Today, the most important thing was to find a good grave for the Mi family. The third grave was located on a small mountain ridge. However, this ridge wasn't the usual one that extended far away. Instead, it had 3 oval-shaped ridges that extended in the same direction. This is Little Treasure's tomb. My grave is here, and it can bless my descendants with wealth and riches. There is no need to talk about great wealth. As soon as we saw this auspicious cave, the young man with the surname Huang, who knew the crepe myrtle star dough technique, was the first to speak. After explaining, he came to a conclusion. This cave is priceless. I think the Mi family should move their grave here. Although his words were full of confidence, everyone agreed with him. Even the old man surnamed Liu, who was glaring at him, didn't say anything to refute him. I also looked around and nodded. This was indeed a good grave. Moreover, the mountain in front of us was famous for its geomancy. The Chalcedony Sutra had an introduction about this kind of terrain. In geomancy, this place was called the Treasure Cave or the Fortune Star. If the grave was located here, the future generations would be rich. Although they couldn't be bestowed the title of Marquis or Prime Minister, they would be rich and have a long life. After the young man with the surname Huang came to a conclusion, he became even more excited. The Mi family is one of the wealthiest families in Hong Kong. As the saying goes, it's not easy to conquer a country, but it's even harder to defend it. It's not easy for the future generations to protect such a great fortune. Although the geomancy of this place isn't that of a real dragon, it's the best place for the Mi family to pursue a long life of riches. Previously, Mi Ding Chung had said that whoever could find the auspicious acupuncture point and explain the principles behind it could take away the 3 treasures after gaining its approval. After the young man surnamed Huang finished speaking, he couldn't wait to reveal a happy expression on his face. At this moment, the old Taoist priest shook his head. Little friend Huang, you're wrong. This auspicious cave was indeed a pattern of riches and honor, but it was more conservative than aggressive. As the saying goes, water flows to the lowest point, and people walk to the highest point. If the choice of ancestral grave is so conservative, how can the family business advance further? Moreover, the Mi family still has 2 choice acupoints, and they are both auspicious acupoints. Why not look at those 2 acupoints before making a decision? There's a saying in Tao, the way of heaven takes away the surplus and makes up for the deficiency. The Mi family has the ancestors' blessing, and we're rich now. If we don't have enough people, I'm afraid it's inappropriate. In my opinion, there's no harm in choosing a slow path. The flying moth's auspicious acupoint fits the pattern of getting rich first and then being noble. It's more suitable as a new grave. This old man was a steady person. The flying moth's acupoint was a moderate one. It wasn't conservative or reckless, so it was more suitable. However, I frowned. These 3 places weren't as simple as they looked. I thought the small treasure lid and the flying moth's acupoint weren't bad, but they weren't as perfect as they thought. There were some flaws. However, the last one, the rising sky acupoint, was wonderful. It was a bit exaggerated to call it a true dragon's acupoint, but it was indeed an excellent, auspicious acupoint. However, I was even more puzzled. These were all auspicious acupoints. That year, the old beggar had chosen the best one and told me Papa. Why did he drag it out and tell me Papa to remember it? It didn't make sense. Everyone debated for a long time, but no one could convince the other. Seeing that it was getting late, Mi Ding Chung stood up and persuaded everyone to return to the hotel. He said it wouldn't be too late to discuss it during the banquet. No one objected and followed Mi Ding Chung back to the hotel. After returning to the hotel, Mi Ding Chung prepared the banquet. However, no one's mind was on the banquet. They were either deep in thought or whispering to each other. Suddenly, an old man in a suit rushed in and whispered something to Mi Ding Chung. Mi Ding Cheng's face lit up. He stood up and said to everyone, "Everyone, for this dragon-seeking banquet. I've not only invited all of you, but I've also invited Master Liang Tian Xian. He's already outside the hotel and will be here soon." Hearing this, everyone was shocked. They hurried to stand up and greeted him. They didn't have time to discuss feng shui anymore. I was also surprised. After thinking for a while, I quickly took out the MO bead and changed my appearance when no one was looking. My original intention was to ask Liang Tian Xian about what happened in the past, so I didn't need to hide myself. However, after seeing the mugwort leaf that Mi Ding Chung took out, I changed my mind. It's better not to have any conflict with Liang Tian Xian. It won't be too late to find trouble with him after I get the 7-star mugwort leaf. Soon, an old man in brown appeared at the door. I raised my head and saw that it was the ghost-raising sect's supreme elder, Liang Tian Xian. As soon as Liang Tianxin appeared, all the feng shui masters present greeted him in unison, and they were extremely respectful. Liang Tian Xian's face was cold. He didn't pay attention to them. He didn't even retract his heavenly master aura. He walked in with a heavy pressure and sat down on the seat of honor. Due to their status, no one dared to take the initiative to talk to Liang Tianxin, even though there were many feng shui masters present. It was Mi Ding Chung who was the first to speak to Liang Tianxin in an ingratiating manner. He smiled and said to Liang Tianxin, "It is my great honor that Master Liang could attend my dragon hunting banquet today." Liang Tian Xian shook his head. "Since Mr. Mi invited me, of course, I have to come." No. Mi Ding Chung waved his hand and apologized. "Master Liang is the leader of metaphysics in Hong Kong. I shouldn't disturb you. It's just that the relocation of the ancestral graves concerns the life and death of my Mi family. That's why I invited you. Please don't blame me, Master Liang." Liang Tian Xian shook his head again. "Feng shui doesn't care about one's cultivation. I'm in this line of work. I study all the feng shui in the world to get closer to the Tao. Mr. Mi's invitation doesn't count." Although the old man's face was cold, his words showed respect to Mi Ding Chung. Mi Ding Chung also felt proud of himself. He smiled and said, "Actually, Master Liang doesn't have to come in person. I've already sent detailed photos of the graveyards to you. If Master Liang can take a look and pass on a message, I will be eternally grateful. I didn't expect you to come in person. This is really, I don't deserve it. He talked a lot, but Liang Tianxian was a little impatient. He waved his hand and said, "It's just a gift. Mr. Mi has given me a lot of money, so of course I have to come. There's no need to be so polite. Besides, I'm quite interested in the 7-star mugwort leaf that Mr. Mi promised today. I'm here to take it." 7-star mugwort leaf. Mi Dingqing was taken aback, but he quickly reacted and said, "Master Liang, are you talking about that green leaf?" He clapped his hands in annoyance and continued, "If I knew Master Liang was interested in that leaf, I would have sent it to you earlier. But it doesn't matter. I have another one with me. Please wait a moment, Master Liang. I'll get someone to bring it over." "There's another one?" Liang Tianxin was taken aback at first, and then a hint of joy appeared on his face. He nodded and said, "It's even better to have 2 leaves. I'm going to take both of them today." Mi Dingcheng's expression changed slightly as he said, awkwardly, "Since Master Liang has spoken, I will not refuse. It's just that I have promised that I will give the leaf to anyone who can help me make the decision." "It's not a good time to." Before he could finish, Liang Tianxin waved his hand nonchalantly. "Of course, I won't do something like that by force. There's no need to change Mr. Mi's promise. I'll just help you settle this matter." Mi Dingcheng already had the intention of getting Liang Tianxian on board. He was overjoyed and nodded. "It's great that Master Liang is willing to help. The dragon vein controls the fate of the world, but it's not the same. Mountains and rivers don't change for thousands of years, so why does the feng shui of the dragon vein change from time to time? The change of feng shui of the dragon vein lies in sand and water. For example, the Yellow River. Have you ever seen the sand of the Yellow River stay motionless for thousands of years? The Yellow River originated from the ancient times, and the river sand flows all the way east to the sea. It's not only the sand and stones in the river that move, but also the fate of the dragon vein of Huaxia. Another example is the dragon vein of Huaxia. Since ancient times, the main dragon started from the Kunlun Mountains and extended to the north, especially the Ji prefecture. After the Tang and Song dynasties, the dragon Qi moved to the south. In the Ming dynasty, the Fengyang Mountains were the center of the Kunlun Mountains. For thousands of years, the Kunlun Mountains had not moved, so why did the dragon vein shift? The key is the sand and water. The dragon vein determines the fate of the world, but the sand and water determine the changes of the dragon vein. Chapter 469. After discussing the importance of sand water in the study of feng shui, Liang Tianxin sighed. He swept his gaze over the crowd and said, "The theory of sand water is indeed difficult. One needs to distinguish the 9 colors, recognize the 9 stars, hear about wealth, official, father, son, brother, and understand life, prosperity, slavery, evil, and release. With your level of cultivation, it is indeed difficult to distinguish. However, the path of cultivation is a difficult one. If you stop because it is difficult, how can you surpass yourself and make further progress? As for saying that sand water is useless, that is even more ridiculous. Countless sages have written about sand water, such as Master Yang's Shaking the Dragon, Doubting the Dragon, Zixia Sanren's Secret of the Jade Letter, and even he too and Luo Shui. If sand water is really useless, why do they need to study it? Do you think that you have already seen more than these sages? Why is Hong Kong the capital of feng shui? That is the result of the real skills of the older generation. You rely on the luck of the older generation to make a living in this line of work. Instead of thinking of the older generation's kindness, you work hard to promote it. Instead, you only care about enjoying life and don't dare to study hard. That's not all. How dare you say that sand water is useless just because you don't know anything about sand water? How stupid and arrogant are you? Hearing his scolding, the feng shui masters were even more embarrassed. They all lowered their heads and blamed themselves. They didn't even dare to look up at Liang Tianxin. After the scolding, Liang Tianxin didn't say anything more. He calmed down a bit and took out a thick stack of photos. They were the photos of the graves that Miding City had sent him. He pointed at the graves and began to explain them to the crowd. The first one is where the Mi family's ancestral grave is. Although it is difficult to support the family's fortune, the sand water is good. This is the broken sand. If it is broken on flat ground, the sand water will be round and clean. Although the acupoint is dangerous, it can also protect the future generations. Also, the flying moth and xiaobao are good. The sand water is round and clean. It is a good acupoint, but it can't be used because it can't pass through the room. As for the last one, it's the Imperial Dragon Pagoda. This acupoint is a major acupoint. Even kings, marquises, and generals can bury each other. However, this acupoint is still difficult to call itself a true dragon. The situation is rather tense, and the energy is dissipating. Counting it, only half the effort is needed. However, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Although this acupoint only has half of the qi flow, it is still a rare, auspicious acupoint. In my opinion, it is most appropriate for Mr. Mi to move the ancestral grave here. After analyzing the pros and cons one by one, Jiang Tianxin came to a conclusion. It should be said that Liang Tianxin's insights were indeed extraordinary. Whether it was searching for the dragon or looking at the sand, they were all very appropriate. Not to mention that he was a heavenly master, and no one dared to offend him. His speech alone was the one with the deepest insights among all of them. The best thing was that Liang Tianxin's explanation of looking at the sand could explain the Mi family's ancestral grave being lucky. According to Liang Tianxin, the dragon facing the sky was not a good feng shui for the ordinary Mi family, but because of the protection of the sand and stones around the graveyard, it allowed the descendants to obtain wealth. However, the sand and stones were fickle, and it was hard to predict good luck. Now that decades had passed, the blessing of the sand and stones had long dissipated, so the dragon facing the sky could no longer protect the descendants of the Mi family. That was why the Mi family suffered a series of disasters. Based on the analysis of the sand and stones, there was no need to compare the remaining 3 spots to choose an auspicious acupoint. The speech was reasonable, and no one could refute it. All the feng shui masters present praised it at the same time, expressing their admiration. Liang Tianxin naturally ignored these people. He only nodded and smiled at Miding City. Moving the graves should be done as soon as possible. Tomorrow is the auspicious day. The sooner we finish moving the graves, the sooner the Mi family can enjoy the blessings. From what he said, it was obvious that he had decided to move the graves of the Mi family. Miding City cupped his hands and thanked him. Master Liang is indeed a feng shui master of Hong Kong. His speech was so profound that even I, a layman in feng shui, felt that Master Zhang's words were reasonable. Tomorrow, I will move the graves according to Master Liang's words. After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Liang Tianxin to ask again. He directly ordered the servants at the side to bring over the 3 treasures and the 7-star mugwort leaf that he had promised earlier. He placed them in front of Liang Tianxin and said with a smile, "These are the items that I promised earlier. Please accept them Master Liang. All the feng shui masters were envious when they saw these items. However, Liang Tianxin was the one sitting there, so they could only watch. They didn't dare to have any other thoughts. Liang Tianxin smiled. His face was still cold as he raised his hand to take the mugwort leaf. Right at this moment, I took a step forward and said loudly, "Wait!" Hearing my voice, everyone was startled and turned to look at me in unison. Liang Tianxin withdrew his hand. He frowned at me and asked, "Young friend, why are you speaking at this time? Do you have something to say?" Although his voice was calm, there was a hint of coldness in it. I smiled. Although the development of feng shui in the mainland has been stagnant in the past few years, its foundation is still profound. Moreover, it has been developing vigorously in the past few years. How could a small place like Hong Kong compare to it? If people respect me, I will respect them tenfold. Since this old man was so rude, I didn't need to give him face. "You, Ma," Zhengkuan was enraged. He pointed at me and scolded me. However, he didn't know what to say. Liang Tianxin's face became solemn. He frowned at me and said, "Boy from the mainland. Very good. Let's not talk about which part of the mainland, and Hong Kong has the best feng shui. Today, we're looking at the Mi family's feng shui. You said that I was wrong about the feng shui layout. Very well, if you point out my mistake, I'll call you my friend. Otherwise, I'll have to help your family's elders teach you manners." I smiled and nodded. I didn't argue and asked for the photos of the graveyard from Liang Tianxin's hands. The feng shui path was broad and profound. Liang Tianxin had studied the Mi family's feng shui from the Dragon Cave sand water. Previously, I had the same opinion as him. I could only see the sand water, and I could barely explain it. However, after Liang Tianxin showed up and showed me the photos, I understood something. After carefully checking each graveyard, I smiled and took out a picture I had taken from the sky, showing it to Liang Tianxin. Chapter 470. When Liang Tianxin saw my action, his eyes turned to the picture. He stared at it for a long time, but didn't say anything. When he finally lifted his head, I smiled and asked, "Taoist Liang, do you see any clues?" "Clues? I think you're just trying to be mysterious," Liang Tianxin said coldly. "Just now, when you questioned me, I thought you were a feng shui master of this continent. It turns out that you just connected these geomancy locations. What are you trying to say? Did these geomancy locations form some kind of formation? Feng shui has its own layout. You connected these geomancy locations. Do you want to dismember the Mi family's ancestor and bury him in his own place? Humph, you look mysterious, but you're just trying to be mysterious." Hearing Liang Tianxin's words, the others also agreed and mocked me. Their words were full of disdain for the feng shui masters of this continent. They were just a bunch of clowns. I didn't care about them and just turned to me, Ding Chung. "Mr. Mi, can you tell me your father's 8 characters of birth?" This, Mi Ding Chung hesitated and turned to look at Liang Tianxin. When Liang Tianxin nodded, he smiled at me. "Of course, no problem." Then he took a pen and paper and wrote down his father's 8 characters of birth. I took the paper and checked. Although the feng shui masters here were shallow and narrow-minded, the strong feng shui of Hong Kong was undeniable. Mi Ding Chung was just a rich businessman, but he could directly write down his father's 8 characters of birth instead of simply reporting the time of his birth. It showed that he had some feng shui background. After getting the 8 characters of Mi Ding Cheng's father, I did a simple calculation and confirmed my previous guess. I didn't say much and just placed the paper in front of Liang Tianxin. "Taoist Liang, why don't you take a look at the life palace of Mi Ding Cheng's father?" Liang Tianxin was a heavenly master with profound feng shui knowledge. Of course, it was easy for him to read the 8 characters of Mi Ding Cheng's father. However, after a quick glance, he became silent. After 2 minutes, he said with a dark face, "The life palace hides dangers. The golden fire tribulation is difficult to live past the year of destiny." Confucius said, knowing the mandate of heaven at 50, it is difficult to live past the mandate of heaven. Naturally, he meant that Mi's father would not live past 50. The golden fire tribulation was the most ferocious of the 12 tribulations of the Fate Palace. It was not something that could be solved by humans. Hearing his conclusion, the expressions of the other feng shui masters changed as well. They all moved closer to check Papa Mi's horoscope. Then, each of them silently divined the horoscope. When they also divined the result, their expressions changed even more. They were dumbfounded and speechless. The 8 characters were an extremely important part of feng shui. Generally, when feng shui masters looked at feng shui, they would first look at the owner's 8 characters. However, the Mi family was moving their ancestral tombs, and Father Mi had passed away long ago, so no one checked his horoscope. The most cautious ones only looked at the horoscope of Mi Ding's city. As for Liang Tianxin, he did not even go to the Mi family's graveyard. He only looked at a few photos and made his final conclusion. Seeing that they were speechless, I said, according to his horoscope, Papa Mi would not have a good death, and he would not have been able to build such a big business for the Mi family. Moreover, the Mi family's ancestral tomb is the Xiong'e Linjeng dragon. Although it is an auspicious point, it needs the fate of the person buried there to support it. With Papa Mi's fate, it would not be able to support it. Even if we take a step back and say that the Xiong'e Linjeng dragon doesn't need a fate to support it, this auspicious point would only bring Papa Mi some fortune. It would not be able to change his fate. After analyzing the situation, I turned to Liang Tianxin and asked, "Taoist Liang, do you think I'm just bluffing?" After hearing my words, Liang Tianxin's face became angry. However, in front of so many feng shui masters in Hong Kong, his identity as a heavenly master did not allow him to be unreasonable. He lowered his voice and said, "You're right. There is something suspicious about this. But what does it prove?" After acknowledging my words, Liang Tianxin immediately retorted, "Papa Mi's Fate Palace had a calamity, and it wasn't feng shui that could change it. Perhaps he had a fortuitous encounter that allowed him to escape the calamity. What does it have to do with what happened today?" After hearing his words, the other feng shui masters seemed to understand. They immediately supported him. Master Liang is right. Nothing is absolute. Although Papa Mi's Fate Palace is dangerous, he has a good death. Of course, there is a cause and effect. How can you be sure that it has something to do with the Mi family's ancestral tomb? Moreover, feng shui masters can change luck, but not fate. This is common knowledge in the feng shui world. You're just a kid from the mainland. Don't you know this? Changing luck, but not fate. I smiled. In the feng shui world, there was such a saying. Many feng shui masters believed that fate was determined when the heavenly Tao created things. It was not something that could be changed by human beings. However, they didn't know that when Tianxiang, at the end of the Song dynasty, wanted to create his own dragon's vein to change the fate of the country, if the fate of a country could be changed, why couldn't one's fate be changed? I said seriously, for ordinary feng shui masters, they only know how to change luck, but not fate. However, that senior wasn't an ordinary feng shui master. The crowd burst into an uproar. What a joke! Kid, you don't have any common sense at all. Hearing my words, everyone was stunned. It was obvious that they hadn't thought about this before. Everyone, including Liang Tianxin, lowered their heads and began to calculate the locations. After a while, Liang Tianxin was the first to react. He said, "The evil sand in the 4 graves is in the astral brain." The astral brain. Hearing Liang Tianxin's words, the other feng shui masters who were calculating raised their heads. Their faces were full of shock, and they couldn't say anything. After a few minutes, the young man surnamed Huang was the first to speak. "These 4 graves, could it be that they're all hiding gold in the astral brain?" His words seemed to have lit a fuse. The 70 to 80 feng shui masters present all whispered to each other in shock. Astral brain hiding gold was a famous feng shui layout recorded in Li Chuanfeng's EC divination. Everyone knew about Li Chuanfeng's pushing back diagram, but they didn't know that he had another great work on metaphysics, which was this EC divination. Generally speaking, this book was about the art of astrology, but in it there were 9 types of feng shui written about the stars and the earth. This astral brain hiding gold was one of the 9 types of feng shui. It wasn't a good or auspicious point at all, but a feng shui of absolute evil. Its degree of evil was extremely rare. According to the EC divination, this kind of feng shui would lead to the destruction of one's home and death. Although Liang Tianxin understood sand and water, he was too arrogant and hadn't gone to the site to investigate. It was impossible for him to determine the location based on just a few pictures, let alone recognize the true feng shui. The crowd discussed for a while, but in the end, it was Liang Tianxin who spoke with a cold expression. "Astral brain, hiding gold. Sand is gold. These 4 graves can indeed be called astral brain, hiding gold. However, I still don't understand. Can you change Mi's father's fate with just astral brain, hiding gold?" I smiled. He really knew how to change the topic. Regardless of fate, the feng shui layout of astral brain hiding gold had overturned his previous view of sand and stone. He didn't mention this at all, and only seized on the fact that I had changed my fate in an attempt to save his face. Unfortunately, his plan failed in the end. It's true that the astral brain hiding gold layout alone isn't enough to change one's fate. However, what fellow Taoist Liang doesn't know is that apart from these 4 graves, even the old Mister's burial place is also astral brain hiding gold. Not only that, but these 5 graves also naturally form the 5 elements. The old Mister's grave is at the gold position in the west, and the other 4 are arranged according to the southern fire, northern water, eastern wood, and middle earth. Due to the miraculous astral brain hiding gold layout, the 4 evil spirits gradually converge in the 5 elements direction and enter the old Mister's grave. Therefore, these 5 graves aren't the astral brain hiding gold layout, but I paused and smiled at Liang Tianxin, changing the topic. Earlier, fellow Taoist Liang asked me if there was another formation here. Now, I can answer you. There is indeed a formation here. The old Mister used these 5 natural feng shui spots to set up an astral brain hiding gold array. Mi's father's life palace hid the gold and fire calamity. That year, the old Mister saw through Mi's father's fate and used his knowledge of feng shui to set up this reversal formation. He used the 5 evil spirits' lands to guide the gold evil spirits of the Mi family's ancestral energy to gather in his grave, thus resolving Mi's calamity and changing his fate. In other words, the old Mister received the Mi family's life-saving grace. After his death, he guided the Mi family's bad luck and the 5 isolated feng shui spots to his grave and shouldered them all, at the cost of bearing 5 times the bad luck. He changed the fate of the entire Mi family. After explaining the entire feng shui layout in one breath, I turned to look at all the feng shui masters present. I sneered and said again, "Your knowledge is shallow, yet you dare to claim that feng shui can change fortune, but not fate?" To borrow fellow Taoist Liang's words, "How ignorant and arrogant you are." Chapter 471. In the book EC Divination, there was metal hidden in the divinity, the locations of several evil sands in the feng shui patterns, the fate of the Mi family's father, and the current situation of the Mi family. All these clues connected together to explain the Mi family's ancestral grave. All the feng shui masters in Hong Kong, including Liang Tianxin, couldn't refute my words. After I concluded that Hong Kong's feng shui wasn't as profound as that of the mainland, the feng shui masters who had been arguing with each other didn't dare to argue anymore. At this moment, everyone's arrogance was completely suppressed. In the end, Liang Tianxin stood up. His face was filled with shame and shock. He sighed and said to me, "Feng shui originated from the mainland and has influenced the entire East Asia. Although the feng shui community of the mainland has suffered many disasters in recent years, just like what this fellow Taoist said, the mainland is still the mainland. Its foundation and structure are not something that Hong Kong can compare with. We, the feng shui masters of Hong Kong, have lost to the Mi family's feng shui. He was a heavenly master after all, so he was more tolerant than the others. At this moment, he knew he couldn't argue anymore, so he directly admitted defeat. This way, he would appear more upright. Seeing him admit defeat, the other Hong Kong feng shui masters looked even more embarrassed. Their moods also sank. They were no longer as excited as before. Ma Zhengkuan was the only one who didn't want to admit defeat. He said to me, "The feng shui of the mainland and Hong Kong have different styles. The feng shui formation of the evil sand in the evil sand was set up by the feng shui masters of the mainland. Of course, you're more familiar with it than me. What does that prove? Moreover, you've only explained the origin of the feng shui formation. Let me ask you, since the evil sand in the evil sand is protected by the feng shui formation, why did the Mi family suffer this time? How can we solve this problem?" Aside from the part where he pestered endlessly at the beginning, the problem he raised at the end was real. The feng shui masters of Hong Kong seemed to have found a fig leaf to hide their embarrassment, and they all chimed in agreement. That's right. This amazing feng shui formation was set up by the feng shui masters of the mainland. Of course, the feng shui masters of the mainland are more familiar with it. I don't think so. What he said about the formation can't explain what happened to the Mi family recently. I'm afraid even Master Liang has been deceived by him. This kid is talking nonsense. Everyone has a herd mentality. If there was only one person standing in front of me right now, then no one would dare to refute my well-founded argument. However, it would be different if there were more people. With Ma Zhengkuan taking the lead, the others immediately started to shamelessly say things that deceived themselves and others. Liang Tianxin was not as shameless as Ma Zhengkuan, who said things like, "It's normal that the Hong Kong feng shui master did not recognize the formation set up by a mainland feng shui master." However, he also took advantage of the situation and said in a low voice, "Today, we're here to solve the Mi family's crisis. Since this mainland fellow Taoist can recognize the gang brain 5 metals formation, I'm sure you can find the real reason for the Mi family's disaster and help Mr. Mi solve the crisis." I smiled. Liang Tianxin's previous actions seemed to be straightforward, but I still wanted to struggle a little bit. It was just like what he said. We were here to solve the Mi family's crisis. If we couldn't solve the Mi family's problem, it would be meaningless for me to recognize the gang brain 5 metals formation. Hearing him, Mi Dingcheng also clasped his hands at me and said sincerely, "Please, young master, if our Mi family can survive this disaster, we won't forget your kindness." With just a few words, they had turned the situation around. If I couldn't solve the Mi family's problem, they would overturn the theory of the gang brain 5 metals formation. Then, they would criticize the mainland's feng shui world. I didn't say anything but picked up the picture of the 5 cemeteries and gave it to Mi Ding Chung. Then I asked him, "Mr. Mi, look at this picture." Mi Ding Chung was bewildered. He turned to look at Liang Tianxin and said to me, "Although I like feng shui, I don't know much about it. How can I see anything?" I shook my head. "Mr. Mi, you don't need to look at feng shui. You just need to look at the connection between the 5 cemeteries." Mi Ding Chung still didn't understand, but he still took the picture and looked at it carefully. Around half a minute later, he lifted his head and said with uncertainty, "Between the 5 cemeteries, there are trees that are connected." I smiled and nodded. "That's right. The 5 cemeteries are connected by trees. These trees, is there something special about them?" Mi Ding Chung didn't understand. "Of course." I smiled and nodded. Taoist Liang once said that the river's rotation is feng shui. When a stone stands in a pond, it's also feng shui. Although feng shui is invisible, it's related to physics. For example, gas and heat need a medium to move. Feng shui also needs a medium to move. Rivers and trees are the best medium to move feng shui. In this Dipper 5 metal formation, the other 4 golden dipper, fiendish dipper, are gathered at the Dipper, and the place where the old mister is buried is also the tiger palm heavenly dipper ominous point. And this path of trees is the circulation path of the fiendish golden dipper. Mr. Mi, take a look at the tree connecting the tiger palm heavenly spirit acupoint to the Xiang'a Linshenglong acupoint where your father was buried. Is there a shortcut? Hearing this, Mi Ding Chung hurriedly picked up the photo and looked at it carefully again. There is indeed a shortcut. Is this the reason why our Mi family is facing this disaster? That's right. Your Mi clan's fortune comes from this 5 elements of Dipper brain formation. Now that the 5 elements of Dipper brain formation is cut off, the 5 elements of Dipper brain formation is obstructed. Without its protection, the Mi clan's original ominous feng shui has gained the upper hand. That's why you've suffered so many disasters. After listening to my explanation, Mi Ding Chung sighed. His face was full of regret. He slapped his thigh and said regretfully, "When my father became rich, he spent a lot of money to buy a large piece of land where the old Mr. mentioned the location of the 5 tombs. Before he passed away, he asked me to keep this piece of land and not touch it. Many years have passed, and Hong Kong has developed better and better. Every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. I don't know how many people have coveted this piece of land. I still remember my father's request, so I haven't touched this piece of land. However, 2 years ago, because of the government's land issue, the chief executive came to me and asked me to use a part of the land. I couldn't refuse him, so I touched that piece of land. I didn't want to leave behind a disaster." The more Mi Ding Chung talked, the more regretful he felt. He looked at me and asked, "Mister, what should we do now? Do we just need to patch up the trees to solve the problem?" I nodded. "After we patch up the trees, we can maintain the operation of the 5 astral brain array. However, since the new trees are different from the old ones, it will take several years for the 5 astral brain array to recover completely. Before the 5 astral brain array is fully restored, the fortune of the Mi family's ancestors will be affected, but at least they won't have any more disasters." Mi Ding Chung gritted his teeth and made his decision. "I only hope that there won't be any disasters. I don't dare to ask for more good fortune. I'm going to contact the chief executive and ask him to take back that piece of land. You don't need to take it all back. Mr. Mi, you just need to make sure that the astral energy tunnel is still there. The surrounding land won't affect the formation." I advised him. Although I didn't know the specific situation, the chief executive had told him about it. Moreover, it was the government's land, and Mi Ding Chung had agreed to it. It wouldn't be easy for him to go back on his words. However, I guess Mi Ding Chung was frightened by this disaster. He nodded and thanked me for my good intentions. Then he insisted on taking back that piece of land. However, after dragging it out until now, I also have the power of a heavenly master, which is enough for me to protect myself. Naturally, the matter of acknowledging a master is meaningless. However, I didn't know why, but whenever I thought of Mr. Li, I couldn't help but sigh. With this inexplicable thought, I followed Mi Ding Chung to the manor of the Mi family. Mi Ding Chung was the richest man in Hong Kong. Of course, he was the focus of the media. His Mi family's manor was very famous in Hong Kong. I often read about it in the newspapers when I was in the mainland. It was said that it cost more than 100 million US dollars and covered an area of 20,000 square feet. It was one of the most famous mansions in Hong Kong. When I first read about the Mi family's manor in the newspaper, I was still a high school student. Back then, I had never thought that I would be able to visit this place one day. After I got in, I looked around with interest. Unlike the low-key car, the Mi family's manor was very high profile. In Hong Kong, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, a huge green manor itself was an indescribable luxury. Under the cover of the green, a compact Western-style building was located in the innermost part of the manor. On the other side of the building was a golden beach and a blue sea. Inside the manor, there was a swimming pool and a tennis court. On the other side, there was a small golf course. The scenery was really beautiful. Mi Ding Chung saw me looking around. It seemed he was interested in the manor. He led the way and showed me around. Then he took me to his mansion and brought me to the room he had prepared for me. After entering the room, I took a look. It was indeed the best guest room Mi Ding Chung had mentioned. The guest room he had mentioned wasn't just a room. It was a spacious, two-story Western-style suite. The lower floor was covered with a warm woolen carpet. There was a fireplace on the west wall, and a flame was burning. The entire room was warm and cozy. The upper floor was naturally the bedroom. It was relatively smaller, but the wall on the outside was a complete floor-to-ceiling glass window. When the curtains were opened, the view was all blue. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, the scenery was beautiful. I pushed the window open and took a deep breath of the sea breeze that had a slight fishy smell. My mood improved a little. Then I leaned back and sat on the American-style sofa behind me. I waited in silence. The person I was waiting for was Liang Tianxin. Although he had given me the 2 7-star mugwort tree leaves for no reason, judging from the mysterious smile on his face when he left, he was obviously plotting something. That was why I had told Mi Ding Chung that I wanted to stay at his place for Liang Tianxin to hear. Tonight, Liang Tianxin would come to find me. With this thought, I turned to look at Mi Ding Cheng's mansion. I couldn't help but smile wryly. If Liang Tianxin came tonight, there would be a fierce battle. At that time, I didn't know if the Mi family's mansion would be destroyed or not. It wasn't that I wanted to trick Mi Ding Chung, but Hong Kong was densely populated. Except for the mansions of wealthy merchants, it was hard to find a place as spacious as this one. I could only think that I would try my best to lure Liang Tianxin to the golf course when the battle started. With this thought in mind, I curled up on the sofa and adjusted my body's energy while paying attention to the situation around me. Ever since I had comprehended the 8th step of the 9-star Heavenly Dipper, I had the clear insight ability. Not only could I see through other people's cultivation base, but my divine sense was also much more sensitive than before. Even if Liang Tianxin had the cultivation base of a heavenly master, he wouldn't be able to escape my senses if he showed up. However, The strange thing was that even though I had been on guard for a whole night, nothing had happened. Liang Tianxin didn't show up at all. Early the next morning, when the sunlight shone through the French window, I got up and frowned, trying to figure out what was going on. What was Liang Tianxin up to? No matter if it was because of his son's death or the fact that I had stood him up, or even the fight for the 7-star mugwort, leaves this time. As a heavenly master, there was no reason for him to let me go. But why did he just disappear like that? No matter how hard I thought, I couldn't figure it out. I had to put it aside for the time being. Soon, the Mi family's housekeeper came and knocked on the door politely, bringing us a nice breakfast. Not long after we finished eating, Mi Dingqing appeared in front of my room again. He looked a little tired and told me that he had discussed with the government last night about taking back that piece of land. Although the procedures hadn't been completed yet, we could start today to deal with the matter of the astral energy passage. Since I had agreed to do it, I didn't have any reason to refuse. Moreover, I needed his cooperation in the matter of the 7-star mugwort leaves. If I wanted to take it, I had to give it to him first. So I drove with him and went to the old beggar's grave for the second time. The first time I came here, I just checked the geomancy of the surroundings to analyze the meaning of the Heavenly Dipper tiger palms layout. This time, I understood that this old senior had received a favor from him. When I looked at the grave that was situated in the middle of the ominous geomancy layout, I felt a bit of respect for him. I clasped my hands and bowed to him a few times. Mi Ding City's thoughts were similar to mine. He had even specially brought 9 colored offerings. After arranging them, he knelt down and kowtowed 9 times. Each time, he kowtowed heavily on the ground to show his sincerity. Chapter 474. After paying my respects to Senior Nameless, I walked around the tomb and found the passage of the astral energy tunnel. It was a narrow forest made of fragrant maple trees, which were common in Hong Kong. It extended from the tomb to a far distance. Although he had seen the location of the broken part of the stellar energy channel from the photos, he still needed to investigate it on the spot to know its exact location. Mi Ding Cheng and I walked in the front. Mi Ding Cheng's butler and his helpers followed behind us. This was originally a wasteland with long grass and deep forests. Naturally, there was no road here. Fortunately, because this place was previously developed, the ground was paved with a stone road that could barely be driven by a car. It was also considered flat, so walking on it was not too strenuous. After walking for around 2 or 3 kilometers, I saw a 10-meter-wide trench in the forest ahead of me. Not only had it cut off the entire forest, but it had also dug a 50-meter-wide pit on both sides of the trench. All kinds of building materials were piled up in the pit, and there were more than 10 simple sheds in the corner. It was obvious that this place was the construction site that the government had mentioned. Before I could say anything, Mi Ding Cheng asked his butler to take a few helpers to check the construction site. Not long after, the butler returned and asked about the situation here. This place was supposed to be used for the government's housing project. Although the surrounding area hadn't been cleared yet, it would take a long time to build the building. That was why they had started the construction work first. However, as soon as they finished digging the foundation, they received the order to stop work and evacuate. Since the order came in a hurry, the workers didn't have time to evacuate. The situation was not unexpected. Mi Ding City had communicated with the Hong Kong government last night, and the order might have been passed down this morning. The workers had no time to react at all. After explaining the situation, the old butler turned to Mi Ding City and asked, "Mr. Mi, should I go and urge them to pack up and leave as soon as possible?" Mi Ding Cheng waved his hand and said, "There's no rush." Then he turned to me and asked politely, "Grandmaster Zhou, the fragrant maple forest was cut off here. After we replant it, we can restore the astral energy passage, right? I nodded. Mi Dingcheng pointed at the big pit and asked, "Such a big pit has been dug out here. If we want to replant, do we have to fill up the deep pit?" I lifted my eyes and looked around. This pit wasn't small. It was more than 10 meters wide and more than 100 meters long. I didn't know how long the construction workers had been digging here. If we were talking about backfilling, it would take at least a month. Mi Dingcheng was asking for a backfill, but from his anxious look, he must be thinking about the time. If it was delayed for a month, no one knew what would happen to the Mi family. I was also a little hesitant. I accepted the Mi family's 7-star mugwort grass, and I was still thinking about how to get information about the 7-star mugwort grass from Mi Ding City. It would be inexcusable if I didn't take care of it. If the Mi clan were to wait for a month or two, Mi Ding City would definitely be dissatisfied, not to mention that something might happen during this period of time. After thinking for a while, I said to Mi Dingcheng, "We definitely have to fill it up. This trench isn't good for the circulation of astral energy. But, Mr. Mi, you don't have to rush. While we're backfilling, we can temporarily restore the passage." Temporarily restore? Mi Dingcheng didn't understand. I nodded and pointed at the big pit in front of us. The astral energy follows the tree. Mr. Mi only needs to nail some steel bars on both sides of the trench. Then we can lay the wooden planks and move the soil over. Then we can plant the tree, or we can find some large pots and plant the tree in them. After hearing what I said, Mi Dingcheng clapped his hands. His face was full of realization. "Master Zhou is really thoughtful. Let's do it this way." Then he called the housekeeper and asked him to contact the person in charge of the construction workers. He said that he wasn't in a hurry to urge them to leave. He could talk to them and hire them to backfill the trench. At the same time, according to what I said, we should first use steel bars in the middle of the trench to temporarily make a place to plant trees. The old housekeeper was a regular worker. After hearing what I said, he went back to the construction site. Before he left, he asked his subordinate to drive the car that was parked at the old beggar's grave over. He asked me Dingcheng and I to wait in the car. This time, he didn't go to inquire about the situation. He was in charge of communicating with the workers and finalizing the employment contract. It took him almost an hour. When he came back, he told us that everything was done. The Mi group would send someone to come and finalize the employment contract with the person in charge here. Moreover, they didn't need to wait for the contract. The workers here would immediately start building the iron chain passage. Following him back was a dark-skinned, fat man wearing a construction hat. He was obviously the person in charge of the construction site. After the old housekeeper explained the situation, the dark-skinned fat man smiled and asked about how to build the iron chain passage, how much weight it needed, and what to build on top of it. This dark-skinned fatty was a shrewd person. At a glance, he could tell that Mi Dingcheng was the big boss here. His words were directed at Mi Dingcheng. However, after he finished asking, Mi Dingcheng turned his head and smiled at me. "Master Zhou, you have to answer these questions." I nodded and thought for a moment. Then I answered the dark-skinned fat man. This iron chain passage needs to be built according to the position of the forest. The width should be the same as the forest, and the depth should be 1 to 2 meters from the ground. As for the weight, the iron chain needs to be filled with soil until it's level with the ground. Then we'll plant the saplings. You can calculate the weight yourself. The dark-skinned fat man looked confused. He clearly didn't understand why we needed to build an iron chain passage in the air and then plant the saplings. However, he didn't ask much. After thinking for a moment, he nodded and said, "It's just filling the soil and planting the saplings. The weight won't be too big. It's not hard. The workers will start working now. It should be done around sunset. Hearing his estimate of the working hours, Mi Ding-chung was naturally happy. He specially asked the housekeeper to give the dark-skinned fat man a bonus. He also promised that the time limit would be 6 in the afternoon. For every hour earlier, he would receive an extra 200,000 HKD. The dark-skinned fat man couldn't hide his smile. After receiving the reward, he ran back. Not long after, a large number of workers came out of the simple sheds. They carried a large number of construction tools and walked to the position of the forest in the trench. They measured the position and built the scaffolding at the same time. Then they started working. Mi Ding-chung managed the entire Mi group, so he must be a very busy person. However, the entire Mi group's business couldn't compare to his luck. That's why he didn't go anywhere that day. He just sat here with me and watched the progress of the project. The old saying was right. When there's a big reward, there will be brave men. Just as expected, with the incentive of Mi Ding-cheng's bonus, the group of workers' enthusiasm was maximized. Although it was said to be 6 in the afternoon, in reality, the iron chain passage had already been built at 3:30 in the afternoon. Then, the workers struck while the iron was hot. They laid the wooden planks and filled them with soil. In total, it didn't take more than 4 o'clock. Mi Ding-chung was very happy. Besides the promised 400,000 HKD, he also added another 100,000 HKD, making it 500,000 HKD. After this project was done, the next step was to plant the trees. Today, Mi Ding-chung had sent people to buy a large amount of maple fragrant wood seedlings. The planting process was simple, but after planting a few seedlings, Mi Ding-chung frowned and asked me hesitantly, "Master Zhou, the other trees in this maple fragrant wood are around 10 or 20 meters tall, but the newly planted trees are saplings that are around 1 meter tall. Can these saplings support this path of astral energy?" His question was right on point. When I told him to fix the passage, I didn't think too much about it. However, Mi Ding-chung was very meticulous and kept me here to guide him. Now, it seemed that his action wasn't superfluous. It was impossible to support the passage with just these saplings. Even if he moved some mature trees here, they wouldn't be able to merge with the forest since they didn't grow here. It was impossible to connect the passage in one go. Of course, this wasn't a problem for me. However, if I wanted to repair the passage, I would have to spend a lot of effort. After thinking for a while, I didn't say much. I just asked them to plant the trees first. Mi Ding-chung didn't ask much and asked them to continue planting the trees. He wanted to stay and watch, but I told him we just need to plant the trees today. There are some things we need to do later, but we don't need to hurry. We can come back tomorrow morning to finish them. Of course, Mi Ding-chung would listen to my arrangements. He asked the old housekeeper to keep an eye on the place while we returned to the Mi family's manor. After returning to the Mi family's manor, Mi Ding-chung and I sat in the living room. Mi Ding-chung was anxious and wanted to ask about the saplings. However, I didn't hurry to explain to him. I have my own plans. Then I changed the topic and asked him about the 7-star mugwort. "Mr. Mi, where did you get the 2 7-star mugwort leaves?" Mi Ding-chung was surprised and hesitated. "They were given to me by an old friend of mine." "Why do you ask?" I didn't beat around the bush. To be honest, I'm looking for the whole 7-star mugwort. It's very useful. If Mr. Mi can provide me with this information, I'll be very grateful. This. Mi Ding-cheng's face became more hesitant. These 2 mugwort leaves were given to me by an old friend of mine who runs a pawn shop. He accidentally pawned them. Since no one came to redeem them after a long time, they became his personal belongings. He knew that I was interested in them. so he gave them to me. If Mr. Zhou wants to find more information, I'm afraid you won't be able to find any clues since it's been a long time. After listening to him, I frowned and felt a little unhappy. Chapter 475. I lifted my head and looked at Mi Ding Cheng. My eyes turned cold as I asked casually, according to what Mr. Mi said, these 2 mugwort leaves are quite old, right? I didn't know if Mi Ding Cheng saw the coldness in my eyes, but he averted his gaze and said with a smile, "It's not that old. I only got these 2 leaves half a year ago. The pawn shop that my old friend runs usually doesn't pawn anything for more than a year, or at most 2 years. Of course, this is from the time when my old friend handled the 2 leaves. I don't know about the situation before that." I smiled coldly and took out the 2 7-star mugwort leaves and put them on the table in front of me. Mr. Mi likes to collect these mysterious things, but he doesn't know much about them. For example, this 7-star mugwort looks like a normal mugwort at first glance. However, if you look closely, you can see that there are 7 silver star marks on the leaves. Because of these silver star marks, the 7-star mugwort has a magical power that can repel evil spirits. Because of this, when the leaves of the 7-star mugwort fall off, they don't dry and turn yellow. Instead, they can store spirit energy and keep the leaves green. After talking about the characteristics of the 7-star mugwort, Mi Ding Cheng looked at me with a strange expression. He said awkwardly, "I've heard about what Grandmaster Zhou said before." I shook my head. "I'm not done yet. Mr. Mi knows all this, but he doesn't know that the 7-star mugwort leaves have another characteristic. The leaves are not indestructible, but they are supported by the spirit energy in the 7 silver star marks. Once the spirit energy is used up, the 7-star mugwort leaves will dry and turn yellow. Normally, each silver star mark can support the leaves for half a year. In other words, after the leaves fall off the mother plant, one of the silver star marks on the leaves will disappear every half a year." Then I looked at him and sneered. Mr. Mi obviously doesn't know about this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lied to me. After many years of cultivation, I was now a quasi-celestial master. I had a sharp aura around me. Even a business tycoon like Medding City panicked when he was stared at by me. He stuttered and couldn't say a word. After the 7-star mugwort leaf was separated from the parent plant, one of the star marks would disappear half a year later. But the 2 mugwort leaves in front of him still had 7 star marks. Obviously, they had been separated from the parent plant for less than half a year. It was impossible for them to be pawned by his friend and given to him as a gift, as Mi Ding Cheng had said. After pointing it out, I didn't rush him. I just looked at him in silence. Mi Ding's city lied in front of me, and I exposed him. If he didn't give a reason, he would lose face. After stuttering for a while, he finally sighed and cupped his hands at me in shame. Also, I had promised to fix the astral energy passage earlier. My reward at that time didn't include Mi Ding City providing me information about the 7-star mugwort. After a few minutes of silence, I looked at Mi Ding City and spoke again. "You're right. A gentleman's sincerity is precious. I promised you to fix the astral energy passage earlier, and I will do the same. However, you've seen the situation today. The hole that was dug can't be filled in a short time. Even if we find a way to plant saplings to reconnect the astral energy passage, those saplings won't be able to support the circulation of astral energy. Even if we transplanted them into trees, the astral energy circulation won't be smooth due to the difference in aura. Normally, it wouldn't be a problem. However, the astral energy passage has been blocked for a long time. Your Mi family's fate is very inauspicious. If this astral energy passage can't be repaired soon, I'm afraid the Mi family will be in big trouble." After saying that, I didn't look at Mi Ding City's dark face and continued. I can tell you that in the entire Hong Kong, or even the entire world, I'm the only one who can quickly repair this astral energy passage and protect your Mi family's fate. Not only that, I can also give your Mi family a good fortune. I can turn your ancestral grave into a true dragon's lair. I guarantee that within 10 years, your Mi family will have a noble person who will rise to the sky. There is only one condition, and that is the information about the 7-star mugwort. I'm not an unreasonable person. Mr. Mi, it's up to you to decide. I didn't mean to deceive you. If the Mi family wants to repair the astral energy passage, there is only one way, and that is to use the power of the true dragon vein. In this world, I'm afraid that I'm the only one who can carry a true dragon vein with me. If I use the true dragon vein to clear the astral energy passage, the power of the dragon vein will naturally affect the Mi family's ancestral grave, turning it into a true dragon's lair. It will definitely benefit the Mi family's descendants. It can be said to be a great fortune. Chapter 476. Mi Ding Chung became silent. The flesh on his cheeks was twitching. His eyes were flickering. It was obvious that he was struggling inside. Although my words were confident, Mi Ding Chung had no choice but to believe me. Why? During the dragon-seeking banquet, I was the only one who recognized the feng shui of the Mi family's ancestral grave. Who was Liang Tianxin? He was the great elder of the ghost-raising sect in Hong Kong. He was the best feng shui master in Hong Kong. Such a person couldn't even recognize the real feng shui of the Mi family's ancestral grave. From this, it could be seen that he had no one to rely on in Hong Kong's feng shui world. Mi Ding Chung could only believe me. I stared at Mi Ding Chung and continued to speak. You know your own business. Recently, the Mi family has been in a lot of trouble because of the ancestral grave. Mr. Mi should know this better than anyone else. Right now, it will take a month to repair the hole. If you want the new seedlings to grow, it will take years. The Mi family might be able to hold on for a month, but can they hold on for years? After explaining the pros and cons, I said the last thing that broke Mi Ding Cheng's line of defense. If Mr. Mi goes back on his promise, of course, it will be a personal loss. However, you are the head of the Mi family. If you let the Mi family decline and don't save yourself, you will be going against the family and destroying public morality. Mr. Mi has to make a decision on whether to preserve his private virtue or follow the public virtue. These words were like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Mi Ding Cheng's ruddy face disappeared in an instant. His face turned pale. His body, that was sitting straight, suddenly bent. He opened his mouth and mumbled a few times before finally speaking. I'll talk. Hearing that, I let out a sigh of relief. Actually, I didn't need to go through so much trouble to deal with Mi Ding Chung. I only needed to use the soul-searching technique. Whether he was willing or not, I would get the answer I wanted. It was just like what I did with Wang Lin from the corpse sect. However, Mi Ding Chung wasn't Wang Lin. He was a wealthy businessman in Hong Kong. If something happened to him, it would attract the attention of the world. The secular world wasn't something I could interfere with. Plus, I had my own principles. Even in the world of metaphysics, there was a need to distinguish right from wrong, let alone in the secular world. If I wanted to harm someone's life because of my own desire, I would fall into the demonic path. Even if there was no one to punish me now, it would become a demon in my heart in the future. My cultivation path wouldn't be able to progress. Of course, the method I'm using right now can't be separated from the 4 words coercion and bribery. It can't be considered very honorable, but at least it won't harm anyone's life. I'm also not a rigid and stubborn person, so there's no need to worry too much about things. I didn't I didn't need to, and I didn't need to be so much. After all, Mi Dingcheng was a veteran in the business world. After he untangled the knot in his heart, he quickly recovered. He was not in a hurry to answer. Instead, he was silent for a while before he said, "Master Zhou, you don't have to be so impatient. Since it's a transaction, we have to exchange the goods. How about we wait for Master Zhou to clear the path tomorrow and restore the feng shui of the Mi family's ancestral grave? Then, I will tell you." I looked at Mi Ding Cheng with interest. This person was quite straightforward. After the fight, he didn't try to keep up appearances and started to talk about the transaction. I didn't care about these small details. I nodded. "That's reasonable. Let's talk about it tomorrow." Then, I got up and prepared to return to my room. All I want is for Mi Ding City to agree. I'm not in a hurry. After all, the Mi family can't run away. If Mi Ding City goes back on his word, then reason won't be on his side. I have countless ways to make him talk. Seeing that I was going back, Mi Ding Cheng came over and wanted to walk me out. I nodded and didn't mind. I let him walk me to the door. Just as I was about to push the door open, Mi Ding Cheng stopped me. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "Grandmaster Zhou, my old friend is a stubborn person. What would you do if he didn't want to divulge the information?" I was bewildered at first, then I burst out laughing. Since Medding City had already decided to go against the oath, these words were like a whore trying to maintain a chastity. I didn't mind. After thinking for a while, I replied, "Everyone has their own desires. Everything has its own value. I only want the 7-star mugwort. Your old friend can name the price. He will give it to me willingly. Of course, if he is stubborn and doesn't want to cooperate, I promise you that I won't harm his life. What do you think?" Mi Ding Cheng heaved a sigh of relief and repeatedly nodded to thank me. I waved my hand and didn't say anything else. I walked back to my room. It was still the same quiet and comfortable guest room. However, just like last night, I didn't go to bed. Liang Tianxin was a heavenly master. I didn't know when he would come to find me. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. I continued to meditate on the sofa and waited. That night, Liang Tianxin still didn't come. I was even more suspicious. I couldn't help but suspect if Mi Ding Cheng had seen through my real cultivation, or if he had sensed the existence of my eyes and the spirit snake. After thinking for a long time, I made up my mind. I would deal with the Mi family's matter first. If Liang Tianxin still didn't come, I would go to the ghost-raising sect. No matter what, I couldn't guard against thieves forever. I had to be careful if I had a heavenly master hiding in the dark. Seeing that it was about time, I made a hand seal again and guided the true dragon energy out of the newly grown maple forest. It circled twice in the air and quickly returned to the jade bracelet. I finally heaved a sigh of relief. Everything was going smoothly. Next, I just needed to do some finishing touches. I estimated that I had lost around 10% of the true dragon aura in the jade bracelet. Although the true dragon aura had the ability to repair itself, the loss of around 10% of the true dragon aura still made my heart ache. 10% didn't seem much, but in fact, 10% of the true dragon aura was equivalent to the Tao energy stored in the bodies of 10 heavenly masters. My realm wasn't high enough, so I couldn't increase my cultivation. Otherwise, just 10% of the true dragon aura would be enough for me to advance to Heavenly Master 10 times. I endured the pain and took a few steps forward. Then, I stepped heavily on the ground. The place I stepped on was the node of this Gang Chi passage. As I stepped on it, the evil Chi that had been forcibly expelled by the true dragon Chi returned. According to the Gang Brain 5 Metals formation, It quickly rushed into the old beggar's tomb through the newly opened Gang Chi passage. The Mi family's ancestral graves, feng shui, had been completely restored. I wasn't in a hurry to move. I stood there and adjusted the Tao energy in my body. I absorbed some true dragon aura from the jade bracelet to replenish the Tao energy that I had lost. I exhaled and walked out of the maple forest. I returned to Mi Ding City's side. Master Zhou. Mi Ding City called out to me. His face was filled with respect that I had never seen before. After he bowed to me, he asked excitedly, "Has it been repaired?" I nodded my head slightly. Mi Ding City's face was full of smiles. He clapped his hands and said excitedly, "Celestial means. Master Zhou is really a celestial means. I've lived for more than 60 years, and I've seen many feng shui masters. I've also heard about Xian Shui methods. However, I've never seen Master Zhou's method of guiding dragons and growing trees. I've never heard of it, let alone seen it. Not only him, but even the old housekeeper and a few idle workers also had respectful expressions on their faces. They bowed as they looked at me. Their gazes were as if they were looking at a god from the heavens. I smiled and shook my head. If there wasn't the true dragon aura in the jade bracelet, my method was indeed a celestial means. However, with the true dragon aura, I only borrowed the power of the true dragon aura. I didn't even use much of my Tao energy. It was far from being a celestial means. However, I didn't need to mention this to Mi Ding City. I just nodded and told him that the feng shui of the ancestral grave had been restored. He just needed to fill up the hole and protect the maple fragrance forest. As for the Mi family's fortune, after this baptism, it would be much thicker than before. The Mi family's descendants wouldn't lack opportunities to rise to the top. They just needed to grasp it well. After Mi Ding City heard what I said, his face brightened. He excused himself and said that he wanted to go to the ancestral grave to pay his respects. He asked me to wait for a while. I understood his mood, so I didn't mind. I returned to his car and waited quietly. After around 1 hour, Mi Ding City finally came back. As soon as he got in the car, he excitedly told me that he had just walked around the maple fragrance forest. The maple fragrance forest used to have a cold aura that made people uncomfortable. However, when he walked in the forest today, he felt warm and relaxed. Even the air was much fresher. I smiled. The maple fragrance forest sent in energy 4 times of the year. Of course, it would be affected. Not only would the aura be cold, but if people stayed there for a long time, the evil aura would enter their body and harm their fortune. Currently, the maple fragrance forest had been nourished by the true dragon aura. Spiritual energy was everywhere. Staying there would make people feel fresh and relaxed. After staying there for a long time, it could even prolong one's life and increase one's fortune. After explaining the situation, Mi Ding City was even happier. He thanked me and said sincerely, "Grandmaster Zhou, you've really saved the Mi family this time. I can't repay your kindness. I can only promise you a favor. If Grandmaster Zhou needs my help in the future, I will risk my life to help you." Chapter 478. Yesterday, when I mentioned this to Mi Ding Cheng, he acted like an aggrieved wife being robbed by a hooligan. He only told me half of the story. But today, his attitude took a 180-degree turn. After listening to me, he clasped his hands in front of his chest and said with an ashamed face, "My words yesterday were rude to Grandmaster Zhou. I only cared about our friendship, and forgot that Grandmaster Zhou had given our Mi family a new lease on life. To tell you the truth, after leaving Grandmaster Zhou's place yesterday, I felt very guilty. Today, I wanted to tell you the truth, but I was too ashamed to do so. That's why I didn't want to tell you the truth. I couldn't help but laugh inwardly. His words were beautiful, but how could I not know what was going on? If he hadn't seen my miraculous skills today, he wouldn't have been so honest. I didn't want to hit a smiling person, so I didn't need to expose his excuse. I just smiled and said, "Tell me the details." Mi Ding Chung nodded and told me the story. According to him, the old friend he mentioned was called Li Linchi. He lived in Hong Kong, and he could take me to see him at any time. After explaining the situation, Mi Ding Chung hesitated for a while. Li Linchi is a little strange. He didn't wait for me to ask, and continued, "Half a year ago, when Li Linchi gave me the 7-star mugwort leaf, not only was he cured, but he also looked much younger than before." I was surprised. Much younger? His complexion improved after he was cured. It's normal for him to look younger. Mi Ding Chung shook his head. Not only did his complexion improve, he's the same age as me, 62 years old this year. When he was sick, he looked very old with wrinkled skin and white hair. No one would doubt that he was 80 or 90 years old. However, when I saw him half a year ago, he looked really young. No one would believe that he was more than 40 years old. He looked 80 or 90 years old, but now he doesn't look more than 40 years old? If that was the case, it was really strange. I pondered for a while and came up with a plan. If Li Linchi could give me the 7-star mugwort leaf, he must be related to the world of metaphysics. His appearance had changed so much that it couldn't be explained from the fact that he had recovered from his illness. The only possibility was that he had practiced some kind of mysterious technique. Mysterious techniques were all-encompassing, and it wasn't strange to have a youthful appearance. However, this man was on the verge of death. Then, he suddenly recovered and regained his youthful appearance. It didn't seem like he had practiced Taoist techniques. Was it related to the 7-star mugwort? However, I couldn't recall that the 7-star mugwort leaf. After thinking for a long time, I couldn't figure it out. I didn't want to think too much about it. No matter what was going on, as long as I could find him, I could figure it out. I wanted to go and find Li Linchi, but Mi Ding City stopped me. Li Linchi lives in a secluded place, and he's a vigilant man. If I go there rashly, I'm afraid he won't cooperate with me. I wanted to find Li Linchi immediately, but Mi Ding City stopped me. Li Linchi lives in a secluded place, and this man is very vigilant. If I go there rashly, I don't think he will cooperate with me. I smiled. Li Linchi was most likely related to the world of metaphysics. If that was the case, it would become an internal matter of the world of metaphysics. It would no longer involve the secular world. If it involved the secular world, I would have to be careful. However, in the world of metaphysics, there was only one rule: the strong preyed on the weak. I didn't need to worry about it anymore. However, from the address Mi Ding City had given me, Li Linchi lived in an ordinary residential area in the New Territories. Hong Kong had a high population density, and this kind of residential area was densely packed. Even if I had the address, it would be hard to find it. I thought for a while and agreed with Mi Ding City's suggestion. I would go with him tomorrow morning. I didn't need him to be the mediator. I just needed him to lead the way. That night, I stayed in the Mi family's manor. However, I didn't stay on guard the whole night like I had for the past 2 days. I summoned the serpent spirit and asked it to guard the place at night while I slept on my bed. Liang Tianxin still didn't show up. When I woke up the next day, I even started to wonder if he already knew about my background. Otherwise, with the addition of old hatred, I really couldn't understand how he could endure until now without making a move. Anyway, if he didn't take action, I would have some free time. Compared to Liang Tianxin, the 7-star mugwort was more important. Mi Ding City had put down his arrogance. I didn't need to urge him. He came to visit me early in the morning. After breakfast, he took me to his car and headed to the new territories. The traffic in Hong Kong was always good. Although it was the morning rush hour, there was no traffic. Shortly after, we arrived at a shabby downtown area in the new territories. After getting out of the car, I looked around. I couldn't help but feel surprised. A few days before I had arrived in Hong Kong, I had been walking around the most prosperous places in Hong Kong. I thought that Hong Kong was worthy of its title as the Pearl of the Orient. However, the downtown area in front of me had low buildings and narrow roads. Both sides of the road were lined with old, three-story buildings. There were a few stalls on the side of the road. It gave me the feeling of a small town in the mainland. It was noisy and warm. Mi Ding City walked next to me. He pointed at a building behind the low building on the left and said, "Li Linchi lives in that building. The residential buildings here are all detached. They don't have courtyards, and the car can't drive in. You have to walk through the alley in front of that building." I nodded and didn't say anything. I gestured for him to lead the way. We followed Mi Ding City and passed by a few stalls. We passed through an alley and climbed a few flights of stairs. Finally, we reached an old iron gate with a bright red Fu character on it. Mi Ding City pointed at the gate and said, "This is Li Linchi's house." I nodded. I was lucky that Mi Ding City was leading the way. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to find the right place with the address alone. I extended my hand and knocked on the door. Then I stood next to Mi Ding City and concealed my aura. It was obvious that Li Linchi didn't want to interact with people from the metaphysics world. I didn't want to scare him at the beginning, so I decided to wait until we got to know each other. After a while, someone came to open the door. However, the door in front of us had a double door. After opening the door on the inside, the iron gate on the outside was still closed. Through the iron bars on the door, I saw a pale-faced man in his 30s wearing a black windbreaker. He looked vigilant as he scanned us. Then he asked Mi Ding City in surprise, "Ah Chung, why are you here?" From the way he addressed me, it was obvious that he was Li Linchi. No wonder Mi Ding City had said that it was strange. This person had fair skin and thick black hair. His face didn't have any wrinkles. If he hadn't told me, I would have thought that he was a young man in his 30s. I wouldn't have thought that he was around the same age as Mi Ding City. After looking at him, for a while, I couldn't help but frown. Previously, I had guessed that Li Linchi was also a person from the metaphysics world. However, I couldn't sense any aura from him. There were only two possibilities if I couldn't sense his aura. One was that his cultivation base was much higher than mine, so I couldn't sense his aura. The other was that he was just an ordinary person. At this moment, I had the cultivation base of a celestial master, and I also had the power of the clear insight from the 9-star heavenly dipper. Not to mention a celestial master, I could even see through a yang god celestial master at a glance. Unless Li Linchi's cultivation base was higher than the yang god celestial master, I would definitely be able to sense him. However, if I said that he was just an ordinary person, I would have some doubts. Whether it was his youthful appearance or the 7-star Artemisia leaves, it proved that this guy was definitely related to the metaphysics world. How could he be just an ordinary person? Before I could understand, Mi Ding City smiled at Li Linchi. "What? Ah Chi, you don't welcome me? Ha! It's been half a year since you came to find me. I've been wanting to visit you for a long time. However, I've been busy with my business, so I didn't have the time until today. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and open the door." I didn't need to tell him. An old fox like Mi Ding City naturally knew how to deal with it. While talking and laughing, he pushed the iron door open. Li Linqi's expression was clearly a bit guarded, but because he couldn't refuse, he glanced at all of us before reluctantly opening the door. As soon as we entered, Li Linqi didn't invite us in. Instead, he stood there and complained to me, Ding City. Why did you bring so many people with you? Me Ding City laughed and pointed at his old housekeeper. This is my assistant. I usually bring him with me. This time, I came in a hurry, so I didn't pay much attention. Li Linqi gave up, but he still looked reluctant. He brought us to the sofa in the living room. Then, he shouted in the direction of the bedroom. Yao Yao, Ah Cheng is here. Go and get some water. As soon as he said that, a graceful woman walked out. She first scanned our faces, then turned to Li Linqi and smiled gently. Then she went to pour some water for Li Linqi. The glory of knowledge realm monster energy proved that she was a fox girl, but how could a human have a demon fox daughter? Li Linqi was lying? I turned to look at Li Linqi. At this moment, he was also looking at the fox girl. His eyes were filled with love and affection. It was the same gaze that all fathers in the world had when they looked at their daughters. At this time, the fox girl softly said, Father, I will return to my room first. Her voice was clear and melodious, but my attention was completely focused on how she addressed Li Linqi. Father, even if Li Linqi was lying, there was no need for him to spend so much effort, right? Moreover, there was no need for him to hide this fox girl. All he had to do was not let her reveal herself. There was no need for him to go through so much trouble. As I was thinking about this problem, Li Linqi and Mi Dingcheng had already started talking about serious matters. At this moment, Li Linqi seemed to have noticed and took the initiative to ask Mi Dingcheng, Cheng, did something happen for you to specially come over? Mi Dingcheng coughed lightly and prepared to lay his cards on the table awkwardly. At this moment, I took the initiative to interrupt him. I casually made up a reason and said to him, Boss Mi, the meeting that we arranged is about to start. Should we go back first? The sudden appearance of the fox girl made the matter even more confusing. At this moment, the fox girl had just left, so she might have heard our conversation. Moreover, the appearance of the 7-star mugwort leaf was most likely related to the fox girl, so it wasn't appropriate to talk about it now. Mi Dingcheng was a smart person. After a moment of bewilderment, he immediately understood what I meant. He nodded to me and apologized to Li Linqi. Chi, I'm really sorry. I'm very busy with my business, so I can't postpone the arranged meeting. I'll go back first. Although Li Linqi felt it was a little strange, he didn't ask much. He smiled and stood up. While chatting, he saw us out of the door. After we got out of the door, Mi Dingcheng raised his foot and prepared to go downstairs. I reached out to grab him and used my other hand to cast a spell. Dao Qi surged out and formed a Dao Qi barrier around us. Then I turned to look at Li Linqi and asked him directly, Li Linqi, is that fox girl really your daughter? What? After hearing my words, Li Linqi didn't react, but Mi Dingcheng's eyes widened in shock. Li Linqi's reaction was similar to Mi Dingcheng's. He was stunned for a long time before he stammered. Are you joking? What fox girl? I smiled faintly, although Li Linqi looked surprised. He had a strange expression when I called his name. He didn't have much of a reaction when I said the word fox girl. He most likely knew about the fox girl's identity. I looked at him thoughtfully and asked, You really don't know? Li Linqi's complexion changed a few times in an instant. He remained silent and did not speak again. At this time, Mi Dingcheng opened his mouth. He seemed to have understood what I meant as he advised Li Linqi, Chi, Grandmaster Zhou is an expert from the mainland. Don't look down on his young age. His knowledge of feng shui is very profound. I also think that your situation these years is very strange. If you really have a fox girl, you must tell us. I'm sure Grandmaster Zhou can help you solve it. I didn't know if it was because Mi Ding Cheng's advice was effective, but Li Linqi finally opened his mouth. Yao Yao is really my daughter, but Li Linqi's expression was filled with struggle and fear. He continued with difficulty, but I also know that there is a problem. It's not Yao Yao, it's Yao Yao's mother, who is my wife. I have been with her since I was young. After so many years, I have more or less found some clues. But Yao Yao is really my daughter. She gave birth to me. He didn't say much, but I understood what he meant. Yao Yao's mother. In other words, Li Linqi had a wife who was also a fox girl. Moreover, she gave birth to a fox girl for him. There were many records of the monster race in the ancient books, especially the fox race. It wasn't rare for them to have a human as a companion. However, it was unheard of for them to have a child. But since the fox spirit could transform into a human, it wasn't strange for them to give birth to a child. I couldn't completely rule out this possibility. Li Linqi confessed, which made me feel that it was a little tricky. After staying silent for a while, I asked him, "Where is Yao Yao's mother now?" Li Linqi shook his head. She said that she had to go to Guangzhou the day before yesterday. She hasn't returned yet. Not at home. I pondered for a while and pointed at the door. "Let's go back. Call your daughter out. I have some questions to ask her." Li Linqi's expression showed that he was unwilling. I understood what he meant and smiled. "Don't worry. Although she is a fox girl, as long as she doesn't hurt anyone, I won't do anything to her." Li Linqi didn't seem to believe me. Mi Ding Cheng quickly assured him for a long time. Li Linqi then heaved a sigh of relief. After staying silent for a while, he finally nodded. "All right, I will bring you in." I removed the barrier and followed Li Linqi back into the house, who knew that the moment we entered the house, a strong gust of wind blew against us. I looked up and saw countless silver threads surrounding me with a strong gust of wind. Judging from the power, it seemed to have the power of a heavenly master's full power. I didn't have time to think and lifted my foot to step forward. The power of the 9-star Heavenly Dipper's 8th step. Insight was activated. A vast power suddenly surged from my body and instantly dispersed the countless silver threads. Even the terrifying demonic wind was completely blocked. The remaining power scattered in all directions, instantly shattering the furniture in Li Linqi's living room. After blocking the attack, I looked in front of me. The person in front of me wasn't the fox girl that I had imagined. Instead, it was a little girl that looked like she was carved out of jade. She looked to be around 6 or 7 years old, but her body carried a demonic aura that was close to the Heavenly Master's realm. It was obvious that the previous attack was from her. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.